Subscribe to Infidelity Tales Lab for more stories. Now, let's begin this one. Chapter 1. 8 years gone. Marshall Wiley stood in his garage workshop, running sandpaper across the wooden frame of a rocking chair he'd been building for 3 months. The repetitive motion had become meditation, a way to quiet the noise in his head. Outside, the October wind rattled the trees, pulling leaves from branches like memories torn loose. His phone buzzed on the workbench. Unknown number. His heart kicked against his ribs the way it always did with unknown numbers. 8 years of false leads had conditioned him to expect disappointment, but he never stopped hoping. Hello. Silence. Then breathing. Young, female, afraid. Dad. The sandpaper fell from his hand. He'd imagined this moment 1,000 times, but nothing prepared him for the actual sound of his daughter's voice. Older now, rougher around the edges, but unmistakably Emma's. Emma? Baby, is that you? His voice cracked. Dad, please don't hang up. I only have a few minutes. She was whispering. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Where are you? Are you safe? Is Corey with you? Questions tumbled out. Listen to me. We don't have time. I'm in Ashford, Montana. It's a small town, maybe 2,000 people. We've been here the whole time, Dad. The whole time. Her voice broke. Mom told us you were dead. She said you died in a car accident and didn't want us anymore before that. We believed her until... Dad, things are really bad here. Marshall's hand gripped the phone so hard his knuckles went white. What do you mean bad? Clyde, he's Mom's boyfriend. He's been... Emma's breathing quickened. I can't say it all now. He hurt Corey last week. Bad. Mom just watches. She's different now, Dad. She's not the person you married. I found an old phone in a storage unit we're not supposed to go in. I found pictures of us before. That's when I knew she lied about everything. I'm coming right now. Give me an address. 143 Hollow Creek Road. It's outside town, past the old lumber mill. But Dad, her voice dropped to barely audible. Clyde has friends here. The sheriff, Cecil Mitchell, he's Clyde's cousin. Nobody will help us. When you come, you have to be careful. These people are dangerous. Clyde isn't just some loser. He runs things here. Bad things. A door slammed in the background. Emma gasped. I have to go. Please hurry. Corey needs you. I need you. Dad, The line went dead. Marshall stood frozen, phone pressed to his ear, listening to nothing. Then he moved. He'd kept a go-bag packed for 8 years. Always ready, always hoping. He grabbed it from the closet, threw in the files he'd maintained on Tricia, and pulled out the locked box from under his bed. Inside, cash, 3 fake IDs Ben Pratt had made him, a Glock 19, and the journal where he'd documented every detail of his search. He'd burned through his inheritance hiring private investigators, following leads, filing police reports that went nowhere. The cops called it a custodial situation. Tricia had joint custody, no violence on record. Technically, she could take the kids anywhere. But Marshall knew better. The way she'd vanished, no forwarding address, disconnected phone, social media deleted, that wasn't a fresh start. That was running. He loaded the Glock, grabbed his truck keys, and called James McPherson on the way out. James, I found them. What? Marshall, are you serious? Emma called. They're in Montana. I'm leaving now. Wait, slow down. You need to think. I've been thinking for 8 years. I'm done thinking. James sighed. Then I'm coming with you. Don't argue. You'll need someone watching your back. Marshall didn't argue. James had been his best friend since college, had helped search countless towns, had been there through the darkest nights when Marshall considered giving up. Meet me at the Junction gas station off I-90 in 2 hours. I'll be there. Marshall, be smart. Get your kids back, but don't become something you can't live with. Marshall ended the call. That ship might have already sailed. Over 8 years, he'd learned things about himself, how far he'd go, what he was capable of when everything was taken from him. He'd traced Tricia to 3 different states before the trail went cold. He'd confronted her parents, who claimed they didn't know where she was. He'd paid Ben Pratt $15,000 to hack phone records and financial databases. Nothing. Tricia Donnelly Wiley had become a ghost. But ghosts could be found. And when you found them, they could be made to pay. Chapter 2. Ashford. The drive took 23 hours straight. Marshall and James switching off every 4 hours. They rolled into Ashford just after sunrise, the town emerging from mist like something from another era. Main Street stretched 6 blocks. A diner, post office, hardware store, bars with neon signs advertising beer, and a sheriff's office that looked too new compared to everything else. Small towns have long memories, James said, eyeing the few people on the sidewalks who turned to watch their truck pass. We need to be invisible. We need information first. Marshall pulled into the diner's parking lot. Act natural. We're just passing through. The diner smelled like coffee and bacon grease. A waitress in her 50s approached with a pot already tilted. Coffee, please. Marshall gave his best tired traveler smile. Long drive. Any motels around here? Pine Rest, 2 miles north. Clean enough. She poured. Passing through or staying? Depends. We're looking for work. Heard the lumber mill might be hiring. She laughed without humor. Mill closed 8 years ago. Whole town nearly died with it. Only reason Ashford's still breathing is Clyde Marks. Marshall's blood went cold at the name, but he kept his face neutral. Marks? What's he do? Construction, development, bit of everything. Bought half the town when nobody else wanted it. You need work, you work for Clyde. She paused. Or you move on. Most choose moving on. Sounds like quite a guy, James said. Sounds like a guy who knows what he wants and takes it, the waitress corrected. Her tone suggested that wasn't admiration. You want breakfast? They ordered and ate in silence, listening to the diner's conversations. 2 men in work clothes discussed a shipment coming Tuesday. An older woman complained about property taxes. Everyone spoke in the careful way people do when walls have ears. After breakfast, they drove to Pine Rest Motel and checked in under fake names. Marshall paid cash. The clerk barely looked up. In the room, Marshall spread out a map of Ashford and the surrounding area. Hollow Creek Road. That's here, 5 miles outside town. Isolated, which means nobody to hear anything, James said darkly. What's the play? I need to see the house first. Confirm they're there. Then we get the kids out. And Tricia? This Clyde person? Marshall's jaw tightened. Then we make them understand what they took from me. They waited until dark. Hollow Creek Road wound through thick pine forest, houses sparse, and set back from the road. Number 143 was a 2-story cabin-style home, lights on in multiple windows. 2 vehicles in the driveway, a Toyota Camry Marshall recognized as Tricia's old car, and a lifted Ford F-350 with custom wheels. Marshall parked a quarter-mile away and approached on foot through the trees. James stayed with the truck, engine running, ready. Through the lit windows, Marshall saw his daughter. Emma sat at a kitchen table, head down, shoulders hunched. She looked too thin, her hair longer than he remembered, wearing clothes that hung loose on her frame. A woman moved through the frame. Tricia, still beautiful, but harder somehow, edges sharp where they'd once been soft. Then Clyde Marks entered. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a beard and sleeve tattoos. He said something Marshall couldn't hear. Emma flinched. Clyde grabbed her arm, yanked her up. Tricia said something, but didn't intervene. Clyde shoved Emma toward the stairs. Marshall's vision went red. His hand went to the Glock. Every muscle screamed to kick in that door. A hand clamped on his shoulder. James had followed, was pulling him back. Not like this, James hissed. You going hot, someone gets hurt. Maybe Emma. Marshall let himself be pulled into the trees, but he couldn't tear his eyes from the house. A light came on in an upstairs window. He saw Emma's silhouette, saw her sit on a bed and put her head in her hands. Tomorrow, Marshall said. Tomorrow I get them out. Ow, I haven't figured that part out yet. Chapter 3. The Horrifying Truth. Marshall spent the next day watching. The house had a routine. Clyde left at 8 a.m. in the F-350, returned around 6 p.m. Tricia left for town around 10 a.m., came back with groceries. The kids never left. Not once. That evening, Emma appeared on the back porch briefly. She looked around nervously, then walked to the edge of the tree line. Marshall moved through the shadows until he was close enough to whisper. Emma. She spun, terror on her face, then recognition. Dad. Tears spilled immediately. She started toward him. No, stay there. Anyone watching? Corey's keeping Mom distracted. Clyde's not back yet. Dad, You have to understand what's happening here. It's not just he's trafficking. Clyde runs girls through this town. Young girls. He tried to make me. She couldn't finish. Marshall's world tilted. He touched you. He tried. I fought him off, told Mom. She said I was lying, that I wanted attention. But I found evidence, Dad. In that storage unit. Pictures, files, money. He's moving girls across state lines. Using the lumber mill as a front. The sheriff knows. Half the town works for him in some way. Where's Corey? Upstairs. Clyde beat him last week because he talked back. Broke his arm. Mom told the doctor he fell. The doctor didn't even question it. Clyde pays him too. Emma wiped her eyes. I wanted to run, but Corey's too scared and I won't leave him. Well, I found that phone and those pictures of us from before, saw Mom's lies. I had to call you. I knew you'd come. I knew it. I never stopped looking, baby. Not for one day. I know. I found your letters, the ones you sent to Grandma and Grandpa Donnelly. They gave them to Mom. She burned them in front of us, said you were harassing us. But I read one before she could burn it. You never gave up. Marshall's hatred for Tricia crystallized into something cold and purposeful. Here's what's going to happen. Tomorrow night, when Clyde's gone, he's leaving tomorrow for 3 days. Business in Idaho. It's the perfect time. Tomorrow night, you and Corey walk out that door. I'll be waiting at the tree line at midnight. Pack light, just what you need. Can you do that? Emma nodded. There's more you need to know. Clyde has files on everyone. Insurance. Names, crimes, payments. It's how he keeps the sheriff loyal. The files are in a safe in the basement. I've seen him open it. If you could get those, just get yourself and your brother ready. Let me worry about Clyde. Dad, I want him dead. Is that awful? I want all of them dead. Marshall pulled his daughter into a brief, fierce hug through the fence. That's not awful. That's human. Now go before someone sees. She disappeared back into the house. Marshall returned to James, his mind racing. Well, James asked. It's worse than I thought. Clyde's trafficking girls. Using the old mill. Sheriff's on payroll. Emma says he has files. Evidence on everyone. Marshall's hands shook with fury. He tried to touch my daughter, James. He beat my son. Tricia watched. James was quiet for a long moment. What's the play? We get the kids tomorrow night. After that, Marshall's voice went flat. After that, I burn it all down. Chapter 4. Gathering Evidence. With Clyde gone and the kids' escape planned, Marshall had less than 48 hours to prepare. He needed leverage, needed evidence, needed something that would ensure Clyde and Tricia couldn't come after them when this was over. He started with Ben Pratt, the private investigator who'd helped before. The call was brief. I need everything you can find on Clyde Marks, Ashford, Montana. Criminal history, business records, associates, and Sheriff Cecil Mitchell. Money's not an issue. How fast? 24 hours. That's not much. Ben, my kids are in that house. Whatever you need to charge. I'll call you back in 12. Next, Marshall drove into town. The hardware store clerk was friendlier than the diner waitress, chatty about local history. Marshall played the interested newcomer. That old mill property, someone said it might be for sale. Mill? That's Clyde Marks' property now. Bought it 8 years back for pennies. Supposed to be redeveloping it, but nothing much happens there except trucks coming and going at night. Night shipments? That's odd. The clerk lowered his voice. Between you and me, folks don't ask questions about Clyde's business. Healthier that way. Marshall bought zip ties, duct tape, and rope, items that wouldn't seem connected. He paid cash. He found Christy Moyer, Emma's friend, at the town library. The girl was 17, dark hair, suspicious eyes. Marshall approached carefully. Christy? I'm Emma's father. She studied him. Emma said you might show up. She showed me your picture from when she was little. Pause. You're really taking them away? Tomorrow night. Did she tell you anything else? Christy glanced around nervously. She told me about Clyde. About what he's doing. My cousin Meg disappeared last year. Sheriff said she ran away, but Meg wouldn't do that. I think. She swallowed hard. I think Clyde took her. Your cousin. What's her full name? Meg Moyer. She was 16. Marshall felt sick. I'm going to stop him, Christy. But I need help. Can you get me into the mill tonight? The old mill? What? Emma said that's where he operates from. I need to see for myself. Christy bit her lip. There's a broken window on the west side. The alarm doesn't work there. Clyde's too cheap to fix it. But if you get caught, I won't get caught. What time does security patrol? Clyde's guys drive by every 2 hours. Last pass is 2 a.m. That gave Marshall his window. Chapter 5. Into the dark. At 2:30 a.m., Marshall and James approached the lumber mill. The building loomed against the night sky, all dark windows and rusted metal. Christie's broken window was easy to find. Inside, the mill still smelled of sawdust and machine oil, but sections had been renovated. Offices, rooms with locks on the outside, a basement entrance. "This is wrong," James whispered, shining his flashlight on the locked doors. "Those are holding rooms." Marshall tried a door. Locked. He used a crowbar from his bag, popped the lock. Inside, mattresses on the floor, restraints bolted to the wall, empty food containers. The walls had scratches, tally marks counting days. "Jesus Christ," James breathed. They photographed everything. Marshall's hands trembled with rage, but he forced himself to be methodical. Evidence. He needed evidence. The office was on the second floor. File cabinets, a desk, and, just as Emma described, a safe built into the wall. Marshall photographed the safe's model number. Papers on the desk, schedules, names, amounts. Transportation routes. A ledger showing payments. One to C. Mitchell for $5,000 monthly. Marshall photographed it all. A noise outside. Flashlight beams through windows. "We need to go," James urged. They slipped out the way they came, seconds before Clyde's security made their rounds. In the truck, Marshall uploaded everything to an encrypted cloud drive Ben had set up. His phone rang. "Ben, you're not going to believe what I found," Ben said. "Clyde Marks has a record, sealed juvenile file, but I got in. Assault, attempted kidnapping. His cousin Cecil Mitchell made evidence disappear in 3 separate domestic violence cases over the past 5 years. And your ex-wife? She changed her name legally 6 years ago. She's not Trisha Wiley anymore. She's Trisha Marks." Marshall's stomach dropped. "They married. Common law. And there's more. Property records show 3 properties in Clyde's name that are flagged by FinCEN for suspicious cash transactions. The feds are watching him. Marshall, they just haven't moved yet. Why not? Because they're building a case. Federal trafficking investigation. But it moves slow. And in the meantime," Ben paused. "I found something else. Missing persons reports from 5 states. All young women. All last seen in towns near Clyde's properties. One of them is Meg Moyer." Marshall closed his eyes. "How do I contact the feds?" "You don't. They'll want you to back off. Wait for their case. Could take years. I don't have years. I have tonight. Then be careful. Federal agents don't like vigilantes." After Ben hung up, Marshall sat in silence. James waited. "I know what you're thinking," James finally said. "But we get the kids first. Then we figure out the rest. There are other girls, James. Maybe still alive somewhere. If we run, they stay trapped. You can't save everyone." "No, but I can stop the man doing this." Chapter 6. The Plan. Marshall needed allies, but Ashford offered few options. The sheriff was corrupt, local cops on Clyde's payroll, townspeople too scared. But fear could be turned into motivation. He found 5 families whose daughters had gone missing. He visited them one by one, showed them the photos from the mill, told them what he'd found. "I can't bring your daughters back," he told each family, "but I can give you justice. Tomorrow night, I'm bringing Clyde Marks down. I need witnesses. I need people willing to call the state police, the FBI, the press. I need you to be brave." Most were too scared, but 3 families agreed. 3 families who'd been silent too long, who wanted their revenge too. Ralph Lewis, whose daughter Gabriella had vanished 2 years ago. "What do you need? Tomorrow at 11 p.m., be ready to make calls. I'll give you phone numbers. Federal agents, state police, media contacts. You tell them everything. Show them the photos I'm sending you." Next was Carla Donnelly, Trisha's own sister, who'd cut contact years ago. "Carla, I know you and Trisha aren't close anymore." "She's dead to me," Carla said bitterly. They met at a coffee shop in the next town over. "It's been since she ran off with those kids. I told her Clyde was poison, but she wouldn't listen. He gave her pills, got her hooked, made her dependent. Then he owned her. Pills. Marshall had known. Oxy first, then fentanyl. Clyde controls the supply. She'd do anything for her fix now. That's why she stays, why she lets him. Carla's voice broke. I try to help. She chose him. Marshall processed this. Trisha wasn't just complicit. She was trapped in her own way. But that didn't excuse what she'd done to Emma and Corey. Tomorrow night, I'm getting the kids out. There's going to be fallout. Clyde won't let them go without a fight. What do you need from me? Testimony. About Trisha's addiction. About Clyde's control. When the authorities come, I need people who'll talk. Carla nodded. You get those kids safe, I'll tell them everything. The pieces were falling into place. Marshall spent the rest of the day preparing. Burner phones, escape route mapped, fake identities updated. He called a lawyer in Seattle, someone Ben recommended, and prepped them to file for emergency custody. At 10 p.m., he and James got into position. Midnight was close. Last chance to back out, James said. Marshall checked his Glock. I've got 8 years of reasons not to back out. His phone buzzed. Emma, ready. Corey scared but packing. Mom's passed out. Pills. Marshall typed back. 12 a.m. Tree line. Bring nothing you can't carry. Then he waited, watching the house, counting down minutes that felt like hours. Chapter 7. Extraction. At 11:57 p.m., the back door opened. Emma emerged first, carrying a backpack, pulling Corey behind her. Corey was smaller than Marshall expected. Thin, with a cast on his left arm, moving with the careful gait of someone who'd learned to avoid pain. Marshall met them at the tree line. Corey froze when he saw him. Corey, it's me. It's Dad. Dad's dead, Corey whispered. Mom said. Mom lied. Emma squeezed his hand. This is really him. I promise. Marshall knelt down. Even in the dark, he could see bruises on his son's face, the way he held himself protectively. I'm here now, and I'm never letting you go again. Corey stared, then broke. He threw himself at Marshall, sobbing. Emma joined them, and for one perfect moment, Marshall had his children back. Then lights blazed from the house. Emma, Corey, Trisha's scream split the night. She stood on the porch, phone in hand. Someone took the kids. Run, Marshall commanded. They sprinted for the truck. James had it running, door open. Behind them, more lights. The F-350 roared into the driveway. Clyde was back early. Go! Marshall shoved the kids into the truck. James floored it. Clyde's truck followed, closing fast. The narrow forest road gave no room to maneuver. He's going to ram us, James said tightly. Marshall rolled down the window, leaned out. Kids, get down. He fired 3 shots at Clyde's tires. The first 2 missed. The third connected. The F-350 swerved, crashed into a tree. Marshall watched in the side mirror as Clyde emerged, alive but furious. They didn't stop driving until they reached the motel. Marshall knew they had minutes before Clyde alerted the sheriff. Pack everything. We're moving. Where? James asked. The one place Clyde can't control. The state police barracks, 40 miles north. We drive there, tell them everything, hand over the evidence. Emma grabbed his arm. Dad, that won't be enough. Clyde has too many connections. He'll find a way out, and he'll come after us. You know he will. She was right. Men like Clyde always found a way. Then we make sure he can't, Marshall said quietly. Chapter 8. The truth comes out. They drove to a rest stop halfway to the state police barracks. Marshall made calls. To Ben, to Ralph Lewis, to Carla Donnelly. Now, make the calls now. While he coordinated, Emma told him everything. 3 years of abuse. Clyde's trafficking operation. How he recruited girls for broken homes, promised them work, then trapped them. How Trisha helped by gaining their trust, pretending to be a friend. How Emma had been next on the list until she fought back. He said I was too old anyway, Emma said hollowly. Said the buyers prefer younger. That's when I knew I had to get out. I couldn't let him do that to someone else. Corey hadn't spoken much, but now he did. He killed someone, Dad. A girl tried to run. Clyde caught her. We heard the gunshot. Mom said it was a hunting accident, but we saw them burying something behind the mill. Marshall felt something break inside him. Not his resolve that hardened, but the part that might have shown mercy. His phone rang. Ben, it's done. FBI field office in Helena, received the files. So did 3 news stations and a state prosecutor. The story breaks in 2 hours. Marshall, you need to get somewhere safe. This is going to explode. Good. Let it explode. But Marshall wasn't going to the state police yet. He had one more stop. He dropped James and the kids at a truck stop with instructions. You drive to Helena. Take them straight to the FBI field office. Ben will meet you there. Don't stop for anything. What are you doing? James demanded. Finishing this. Marshall. He tried to sell my daughter, James. He beat my son. I'm not letting him walk away from that. Now go. Emma grabbed him. Dad, please. Let the police handle it. The police in this town work for him, baby. This ends tonight, or it never ends. He drove back to Ashford alone, back to Hollow Creek Road. Dawn was breaking. Clyde's F-350 was in the driveway, damaged but drivable. Marshall parked down the road and approached on foot. The front door was unlocked. Inside, chaos. Trish on the couch, scratching at her arms, withdrawing. Clyde paced, phone pressed to ear. I don't care what it costs, Cecil. Find them. They've got. He saw Marshall. The phone fell. You. Me. Clyde reached for a gun on the table. Marshall's Glock was already aimed. Don't. You took my kids, you son of a... I took them like kids. The ones you beat and try to traffic. Yeah, I know everything, Clyde. Federal agents know too. Right now, they're getting warrants. It's over. Tricia stirred. Marshall. She looked worse up close, hollow-eyed, track marks visible. You're alive? Did you really think I was dead? Or did you just want to believe it because it was easier than admitting what you'd done? I didn't have a choice. He said if I didn't help, he'd. You had every choice. You chose pills over our children. You watched him hurt them. You helped him hurt other people's children. Marshall's voice was cold. You're not a victim, Tricia. You're an accomplice. Clyde moved. Marshall shot him in the leg. Clyde went down screaming. That's for Corey's broken arm, Marshall said. He shot him in the other leg. That's for touching my daughter. Jesus Christ, you're insane. Clyde writhed on the floor. No, I'm a father. Marshall pulled out zip ties, bound Clyde's hand behind his back. You're going to live, unfortunately, because you're going to prison for a very long time. And I want you to suffer every day knowing you're never getting out. Sirens in the distance. Not local. These were different. State police. Ralph Lewis had made his calls. The cavalry was coming. Marshall turned to Tricia. You're going to get clean. You're going to testify against him. And you're never seeing our kids again. If you try, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what you did. Every detail. Every girl you helped him trap. Your sister's already talking. Others will too. Tricia sobbed, curling into herself. The state police burst in, guns drawn, and found Marshall standing over Clyde with his hands up. Marshall Wiley? We need you to come with us. I know. Just do me one favor. Check the basement of the old lumber mill. There might be girls still alive down there. Please. The lead officer studied him. We got teams heading there now. Thanks to your information. He cuffed Marshall. Procedure, he explained. You're not under arrest. But we need your statement. As they led Marshall out, he saw Cecil Mitchell being cuffed near his patrol car. Others too. Clyde's network collapsing like dominoes. It was over. Chapter 9. 8 years later. Marshall stood at Emma's college graduation, watching her walk across the stage to receive her degree in social work. She'd spent the last 4 years healing, getting therapy, helping other survivors. She turned her trauma into purpose. Corey sat beside him, now 22, studying criminal justice. The cast had come off years ago, but the emotional scars took longer. Still, he was good. They were both good. The trial had been national news. Clyde Marks sentenced to life without parole on trafficking, kidnapping, and murder charges. They'd found Meg Moyer's body behind the mill, along with 2 others. 3 more girls were rescued alive from a property in Idaho. Tricia took a plea deal, 20 years, eligible for parole in 12. Her testimony had been crucial. Marshall hadn't spoken to her since that night. Emma and Corey had seen her once during the trial. They'd told her they forgave her, but they didn't want her in their lives. She'd accepted that. Cecil Mitchell got 15 years. Dozens of others caught in the sweep. Ashford's corruption exposed, cleaned out. Marshall had faced charges for shooting Clyde, but with the evidence of what Clyde had done and testimony about the immediate threat, The prosecutor declined to file. Self-defense of others, they called it. After Emma received her diploma, she found Marshall in the crowd. "Hey, Dad. Hey, graduate." He hugged her tight. "Proud of you, Em. Couldn't have done it without you. You never stopped looking for us. Never crossed my mind to stop. I know. That's why we're okay now. Because even when we didn't know you were searching, you were. You never gave up on us." Corey joined them. Group hug moment. They laughed, embraced. A family rebuilt from ruins. That night, Marshall returned to his workshop. The rocking chair he'd been building 8 years ago sat in the corner, finished now. He'd completed it after bringing the kids home, had given it to Emma when she left for college. James dropped by with beer. Big day. The biggest. Marshall took a bottle. "Thanks for being there, James. For all of it. Where else would I be? You'd have done the same." They drank in comfortable silence. Outside, the October wind rattled the trees again. But this time, it didn't pull at memories. The memories were settled now, healed, transformed into something that looked almost like peace. "You ever think about what you do differently?" James asked. Marshall considered. "Not much. Maybe I'd have found them sooner." But Emma said something once. She said that the years apart made her stronger, made her understand the value of family in a way she wouldn't have otherwise. "I'm not saying it was worth it, but we survived. We're together now. That's what matters." His phone buzzed. "Emma, love you, Dad. Thanks for never giving up." Marshall typed back, "Love you too, baby. Always." He thought about Clyde, rotting in prison. He thought about the girls they'd saved, getting their lives back. He thought about justice, not perfect, rarely clean, but earned. 8 years stolen. But 8 years couldn't erase the bond between father and child. Tricia had tried. Clyde had tried. Both had failed. Because some things, once forged, couldn't be broken. Not by distance. Not by lies. Not by time. Marshall Wiley had spent 8 years searching. And he'd found his way home. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, The Awakening. Roy Vaughn had built his empire on precision and control. At 38, he owned 3 successful construction companies across Texas, commanded respect in every boardroom he entered, and possessed the kind of calculating intelligence that made lesser men uncomfortable. His steel-gray eyes missed nothing, and his reputation for decisive action preceded him wherever he went. The Vaughn household in affluent Highland Park reflected his success. A sprawling colonial with manicured grounds where his wife, Cindy Barrett Vaughn, played the perfect suburban mother to their 6-month-old son, Mason. Roy had married Cindy 5 years ago, drawn to her stunning beauty and seemingly innocent charm. She was 28 now, with cascading blonde hair and emerald eyes that had captivated him during their whirlwind courtship. Roy's business partner and closest friend, Gabriel Bond, was practically family. The two men had served together in the Marines before starting their construction empire. Gabriel, 35 with dark hair and an easy smile, was Mason's godfather and frequent dinner guest. Roy trusted him implicitly, a trust that would soon prove catastrophic. That Tuesday evening in October, Roy was reviewing contracts in his home office when his phone exploded with calls. His assistant's frantic voice cut through the silence. "Mr. Vaughn, there's been an emergency at your house. Paramedics." Roy's blood turned to ice as he raced home, his mind rejecting the possibilities. He burst through his front door to find chaos. Emergency vehicles, neighbors gathered on his lawn, and his wife, Cindy, sobbing hysterically in the arms of Gabriel. "I came home to find paramedics in my living room and my mother crying," Roy would later recount to investigators, though Cindy's mother wasn't present that day. The EMT, a seasoned professional named Craig Macias, approached him with grave eyes. "Your son stopped breathing. I found him blue and lifeless in his crib," the EMT explained, his voice clinical yet compassionate. "Possible SIDS, but we revived him. He's stable now, but we need to get him to Children's Medical Center immediately. Roy's world tilted. His son, his perfect, healthy baby boy, had nearly died. As the ambulance screamed toward the hospital, Roy held Cindy's trembling hand while Gabriel followed his car. None of them spoke during that terrifying journey. At the hospital, the pediatrician, Dr. Ellen Heath, pulled Roy aside after Mason was stabilized. Her expression was troubled, professional mask slipping slightly. "Sir, your baby was given a respiratory suppressant. We need to know who was alone with him because the timing suggests this wasn't accidental." The words hit Roy like physical blows. Someone had deliberately poisoned his infant son. His mind immediately cataloged the day's events. He'd left for work at 7 a.m. Cindy had been home with a baby, and Gabriel had mentioned stopping by during lunch to drop off some documents. Roy's hands clenched into fists as the implications crystallized. His wife had been acting strangely for weeks. Secretive phone calls, unexplained absences, a new wardrobe that seemed designed to impress someone. Gabriel had been overly attentive lately, always finding excuses to visit, always ready with a comforting hand when Cindy seemed stressed. Who had access to the baby today? Dr. Heath pressed gently. Roy's voice was barely controlled when he answered. "My wife and my business partner." They were both alone with Mason at different times. As he stood in that sterile hospital corridor, watching his son fight for life through the NICU window, Roy Vaughn felt something fundamental shift inside him. The man who had always prided himself on loyalty and trust realized he'd been played for a fool. But unlike the broken husbands in countless stories of betrayal, Roy wouldn't crumble or forgive. He would destroy them both. Chapter 2. The Investigation. Roy spent the next 3 days at Mason's bedside, maintaining the facade of a concerned father while his mind worked with cold precision. The toxicology reports confirmed traces of a powerful respiratory depressant, something that required medical knowledge to obtain and administer. Gabriel had been a combat medic in the Marines. The knowledge hit Roy like a sledgehammer. While Cindy fretted and played the devastated mother for the hospital staff, Roy began his investigation. Years of military training and business dealings had taught him patience and thoroughness. He would gather evidence methodically before striking. The first crack appeared when Roy accessed their home security system remotely. The footage from that Tuesday revealed Gabriel arriving at 11:30 a.m., 30 minutes earlier than he'd claimed. More damning was the timestamp showing him leaving Cindy's bedroom at 12:45 p.m., adjusting his clothes and hair. Roy's jaw tightened as he watched his wife emerge 15 minutes later, smoothing down her dress with a satisfied smile that made his blood boil. They'd been having an affair under his roof, around his child. But the real revelation came when Roy hired a private investigator, a former police detective named Scott Stout. Within 48 hours, Scott delivered a comprehensive report that painted a picture of systematic betrayal spanning 8 months. They've been meeting at the Marriott downtown twice a week, Scott reported in Roy's office Friday morning. Credit card records show Gabriel's been paying for the rooms. But here's the interesting part. Your wife's been researching life insurance policies and custody laws. Roy's expression remained impassive, but inside, rage built like pressure in a boiler. Continue. She's also been in contact with a divorce attorney, Jackie Bradshaw. Preliminary consultation last month. And get this, Gabriel's been liquidating assets. Sold his boat, cashed in some investments. Looks like they're planning to run. The final piece came from hospital security footage that Scott obtained through contacts. It showed Gabriel entering the NICU area during visiting hours earlier that week, wearing scrubs he had no authorization to possess. He'd been casing the hospital, learning routines, understanding how to navigate medical facilities. Roy leaned back in his leather chair, his mind assembling the full picture. They hadn't just betrayed him, they'd tried to murder his son. The motive became clear, with Mason dead and Roy potentially blamed or devastated by grief. Cindy could divorce him, take half his assets, and disappear with Gabriel. But they'd made one critical error. They'd underestimated Roy Vaughn. "Scott," Roy said quietly, his voice carrying an edge that made the investigator straighten. "I need you to dig deeper. I want to know everything about their families, their friends, their finances." Every weakness, every vulnerability. And I need it done quietly. How deep do you want me to go, Mr. Vaughn? Roy's smile was arctic. All the way to hell, if necessary. They tried to kill my son. Now I'm going to kill everything they care about. That evening, Roy returned home to find Cindy preparing dinner, playing the role of concerned wife. Gabriel sat at the kitchen table, holding Mason with what appeared to be genuine affection. "How's the little fighter doing?" Roy asked, accepting his son from Gabriel's arms. The baby gurgled happily, unaware of the deadly game being played around him. "The doctors say he's completely recovered," Cindy said, her performance flawless. Thank God Gabriel was here that day. He knew exactly what to do. Gabriel nodded modestly. "Just glad I could help. Mason's like my own nephew." Roy smiled warmly at both of them, even as he planned their destruction. "We're so lucky to have friends like you, Gabriel. Family means everything." The irony was exquisite. They thought they'd succeeded in deceiving him, but Roy had always been the superior strategist. Now he would show them what true ruthlessness looked like. Chapter 3. The Gathering Storm. Over the next 2 weeks, Roy maintained his facade while assembling his instruments of revenge. His investigation had revealed vulnerabilities in both Cindy and Gabriel that he intended to exploit without mercy. Cindy's weakness was her family, specifically her younger sister Jerry Barrett Willis, a struggling single mother of 2 in Oklahoma. Jerry worked as a bank teller and barely made ends meet, often calling Cindy for financial help that Roy had unknowingly provided. Through Scott Stout, Roy discovered that Jerry had been skimming small amounts from customer accounts to pay for her diabetic daughter's insulin, a crime that could send her to prison for years. Gabriel's vulnerability was more personal. His ex-wife Lynn Bond Moore lived in California with their teenage son Charlie Bond. Gabriel sent substantial support payments and desperately wanted visitation rights that Lynn frequently denied. What Gabriel didn't know was that Lynn had been documenting every missed visit, every late payment, building a case to terminate his parental rights permanently. Roy also uncovered Gabriel's massive gambling debts, nearly $200,000 owed to some very dangerous people in Dallas's underground betting scene. Gabriel had been using company funds to make minimum payments, a fact Roy had deliberately overlooked to maintain their partnership. Now it would become a weapon. The construction business provided Roy with additional assets. His company employed several men with checkered pasts, ex-convicts grateful for second chances who owed their livelihoods to Roy's generosity. Men like Rudy Ellison, a former enforcer who'd served 8 years for assault, and Todd Long, whose expertise with explosives had been acquired through less than legal means. Roy's plan began to crystallize during a family dinner that included Gabriel and the Vaughn's neighbors, Emmanuel Simon and his wife Cara Ward Simon. Emmanuel was a pharmaceutical executive with access to various medications, while Cara worked in the county clerk's office with intimate knowledge of legal proceedings. "You know," Roy mused over dessert, "I've been thinking about expanding the business. Maybe bringing in some new partners, restructuring things." Gabriel's fork paused halfway to his mouth. "Restructuring how?" "Oh, just making sure everyone's protected. Insurance policies, legal safeguards. You never know what could happen." Roy's smile was genuine warmth masking deadly intent. "Family has to come first." Cindy squeezed his hand affectionately. "You're such a good provider, Roy. Mason and I are so lucky." "Lucky," Roy repeated, the word tasting like ash. "Yes, we're all very lucky." After their guests left, Roy retreated to his study and began making calls. The first was to Aaron Daly, a former military colleague who now worked in private security. "Aaron, I need a favor. Remember those contacts you maintained in various, unofficial capacities?" "Always happy to help a brother in arms, Roy. What kind of assistance are we talking about?" "The kind that requires absolute discretion and flexible moral boundaries." Aaron's chuckle was dark. "My favorite kind. When do we start?" The second call went to his attorney, Herbert McKinney, a man whose ethics were as flexible as his fees were exorbitant. "Herbert, I need you to draft some documents. Partnership dissolution agreements, custody papers, insurance policy adjustments. And I need them all to be ironclad and immediately enforceable. Planning some changes, Roy? You could say that. I'm cleaning house." The final call was to Brian Williamson, a contact in the pharmaceutical industry who specialized in substances that were difficult to trace and impossible to treat. Roy Vaughn, I have a business proposition that requires your particular expertise. I'm listening. I need something that causes intense, prolonged suffering without permanent physical damage. Something that would make death seem preferable, but keep the subject alive to experience every moment. There was a pause. That's a very specific request. I'm a very specific man. Can you deliver? For the right price, I can't deliver anything. Roy hung up and poured himself 3 fingers of scotch, staring out at his property where security lights illuminated perfectly manicured grounds. Somewhere in the house, his wife slept peacefully, probably dreaming of her escape with Gabriel. His son rested safely in the nursery, unaware that his father was planning a war. Roy had always believed in Old Testament justice, an eye for an eye. They'd try to take his son's life and destroy his family. Now he would take everything they had, everyone they loved, and leave them with nothing but pain and regret. The gathering storm was about to break, and Roy Vaughn intended to be the lightning that destroyed his enemies completely. Chapter 4: The Web Titans. Roy's plan entered its execution phase on a crisp November morning. He'd spent 3 weeks weaving an intricate web of surveillance, manipulation, and carefully planted evidence. Now it was time to begin pulling the strings. The first move targeted Cindy's sister Jerry. Roy had Aaron Daly plant evidence of her embezzlement in ways that would be discovered during a routine audit. Then he had Scott Stout anonymously tip off federal investigators about irregularities at her bank branch. Within hours, FBI agents were at Jerry's door. Roy watched through surveillance feeds as his sister-in-law was arrested, her children screaming as she was handcuffed and led away. The local news picked up the story, local bank teller charged with federal fraud. When Cindy saw the report that evening, she collapsed into Roy's arms, sobbing. "Oh God, Roy, Jerry's been arrested. They're saying she stole money." Roy held her close, stroking her hair with practiced comfort. "I'm so sorry, honey. We'll get her the best lawyer money can buy. Family takes care of family." What Cindy didn't know was that Roy had already contacted Jerry's court-appointed attorney and made it clear that any assistance from the Vaughn family would be contingent on Jerry providing detailed information about Cindy's recent behavior, phone calls, and private conversations. Desperate to protect her children, Jerry would soon become an unwitting asset in Roy's campaign. The second phase targeted Gabriel's financial vulnerabilities. Roy arranged for his gambling debts to be called in immediately, all $200,000 worth. Through intermediaries, he'd purchased Gabriel's markers from various bookmakers, consolidating the debt under his own shadow companies. Gabriel received a visit from Rudy Ellison and 2 other intimidating men who explained that the payment schedule had been accelerated and that failure to pay within 48 hours would result in severe physical consequences. When Gabriel frantically called Roy for a company loan, Roy was ready. "Jesus, Roy, I'm in serious trouble. Some guys I owe money to are making threats. I need 200 grand, just temporarily." Roy's voice was concerned, helpful. "That's a lot of money, Gabriel. What kind of trouble are we talking about?" "Gambling debts. I know I screwed up, but these aren't the kind of people you can negotiate with." "Gambling debts? Gabriel, that's illegal in Texas. If this comes out, it could destroy our business licenses, our reputation." Roy paused dramatically. "But your family. I'll figure something out." The hook was set. Roy agreed to loan Gabriel the money, but required full financial disclosure and temporary signing authority over Gabriel's personal accounts for legal protection. Gabriel, desperate and grateful, signed everything without reading the fine print. Meanwhile, Roy escalated his surveillance operation. He had Todd Long install virtually undetectable cameras throughout Gabriel's apartment, and Aaron Daly place tracking devices on both Gabriel's and Cindy's vehicles. Every movement, every conversation, every intimate moment was now being recorded. The evidence Roy gathered was damning beyond his original suspicions. Cindy and Gabriel weren't just having an affair. They were planning Roy's complete destruction. Hidden cameras caught them discussing how to trigger a mental breakdown that would allow Cindy to have Roy committed, gaining control of his assets while Gabriel managed the business. "He's so stressed about Mason," Cindy said during one recorded session. "If something else happened, maybe another accident, it might push him over the edge." Gabriel nodded thoughtfully. PTSD from his military service, business pressure, family trauma. "We could make a compelling case for involuntary commitment. And then we'd be free," Cindy whispered, kissing him passionately. Roy watched the footage with ice-cold fury. They weren't just betraying him. They were planning to steal his sanity, his freedom, and his son. The attempted murder of Mason hadn't been about insurance money or custody arrangements. It had been a psychological weapon designed to destabilize Roy's mental state. But they'd miscalculated completely. Roy wasn't breaking down. He was building up an arsenal of destruction that would annihilate them both. The third phase involved Roy's pharmaceutical contact, Brian Williamson. The substance Roy had requested was a designer compound that caused intense anxiety, paranoia, and physical discomfort without leaving traceable evidence. Small doses administered over time would create symptoms that mimicked severe mental illness. Roy began adding the compound to Gabriel's coffee during their daily business meetings. Within days, Gabriel was experiencing panic attacks, insomnia, and growing paranoia that his gambling creditors were watching him constantly. "I keep seeing the same car following me," Gabriel confided to Roy during a particularly stressful afternoon. "And I've been having these episodes. Racing heart, can't breathe, feeling like something terrible is about to happen." Roy nodded sympathetically while adjusting Gabriel's coffee cup. "Sounds like anxiety. Maybe you should see a doctor. Stress can really mess with your head." The beautiful irony wasn't lost on Roy. Gabriel was experiencing exactly the psychological breakdown he'd planned to inflict on his victim. By the end of November, Roy's enemies were trapped in a web of their own making. Cindy was emotionally devastated by her sister's arrest and legal troubles. Gabriel was physically and mentally deteriorating while drowning in debt and paranoia. And both remained completely unaware that their intended victim was orchestrating their destruction with ruthless precision. Roy stood in his study that night, reviewing surveillance footage and financial records, planning the next phase of his campaign. The baby monitor on his desk crackled softly with Mason's peaceful breathing, a constant reminder of what these people had tried to take from him. They wanted to destroy his family and steal his life. Now Roy would show them what real destruction looked like. Chapter 5. The News Titans. December brought the first major confrontation as Roy's psychological warfare reached critical mass. Gabriel was now barely functional, jumping at shadows and making increasingly erratic decisions that jeopardized their business operations. Cindy was spending most of her time on the phone with lawyers trying to help her sister, leaving Mason in Roy's care more frequently, exactly as he'd planned. The brilliance of Roy's strategy lay in its subtlety. To outside observers, he appeared to be the stable, supportive husband holding his family together during multiple crises. When Gabriel's work performance declined, Roy covered for him publicly while documenting every failure privately. When Cindy needed time to handle Jerry's legal problems, Roy graciously adjusted his schedule to care for Mason, earning sympathy from friends and neighbors. "Roy's been amazing through all this," Cindy told her friend Christy Atkins during a recorded phone conversation. "I don't know what I'd do without him." Roy smiled coldly as he listened to the playback. His wife's genuine appreciation for his support while she planned his destruction added another layer of satisfaction to his revenge. The next phase involved exploiting Gabriel's deteriorating mental state. Roy arranged for Emmanuel Simon to casually mention during a dinner party that he'd seen Gabriel's car outside a known gambling establishment. Information that was technically true since Roy had Aaron Daly park it there, while Gabriel was unconscious from an especially strong dose of the anxiety compound. "I'm worried about Gabriel," Emmanuel told the group, including several mutual friends. "I've seen him at some pretty questionable places lately." The gossip spread quickly through their social circle. Gabriel found himself excluded from social gatherings and business opportunities as word of his gambling problem circulated. His increasing paranoia and erratic behavior only reinforced the narrative Roy was carefully constructing. Meanwhile, Roy began the delicate process of separating Gabriel from the company. Using Gabriel's signed financial agreements, Roy had legal authority to make business decisions during Gabriel's mental health crisis. He systematically transferred Gabriel's shares to a trust controlled by Roy, liquidated Gabriel's assets to pay gambling debts, and moved key accounts to new managers. When Gabriel finally realized what was happening, he was too deeply compromised to fight back effectively. "Roy, what the hell is going on with my accounts?" Gabriel demanded during a confrontation in Roy's office. His hands shook from withdrawal-like symptoms caused by the compound, and dark circles under his eyes made him look haggard and desperate. Roy maintained perfect composure. "I'm following the agreements you signed, Gabriel. Your gambling debts were creating legal liability for the company. I had to protect our business. Those debts were private. You had no right. I had every right. You signed financial disclosure agreements and gave me temporary authority. Everything I've done is completely legal." Roy's voice was reasonable, concerned. "Gabriel, you're not thinking clearly. Maybe you should consider getting professional help." Gabriel's paranoia spiked. "You're trying to steal the company. You're destroying my life." "I'm trying to save your life," Roy replied calmly. "Look at yourself, man. When's the last time you slept? When did you last eat a full meal? You're having a breakdown." The conversation was being recorded, of course. Gabriel's increasingly aggressive behavior would provide perfect evidence for any future legal proceedings about his mental instability and unfitness for business partnership. But Roy's masterpiece was the trap he prepared for Cindy. Using information extracted from her sister Jerry, Roy knew about Cindy's secret bank account in the Cayman Islands. Money she'd been siphoning from household expenses for months to fund her escape with Gabriel. Roy had Brian Williamson create a special compound that would cause temporary but severe food poisoning symptoms. On the night of December 15th, Roy slipped the substance into Cindy's wine during dinner, then left for an emergency business meeting that would provide him with an alibi. While Cindy suffered through what appeared to be violent food poisoning, Roy was burglarizing their own home, specifically Cindy's private office. He photographed documents, copied computer files, and planted additional evidence of her affair and financial theft. Most importantly, he accessed her secret communication devices and discovered the full extent of their plot against him. The text messages were beyond damning. "Cindy to Gabriel, R is getting suspicious. We need to move faster." Gabriel to Cindy, "Baby, incident should have worked. Maybe we need something more direct." Cindy to Gabriel, "Can't risk anything that traces back to us. Mental breakdown plan is safer." Gabriel to Cindy, "What about Mason? He complicates things." Cindy to Gabriel, "Kids adapt. He'll never remember his father anyway." That final message sealed their fate. They weren't just planning to destroy Roy. They were discussing casualty, dismissing the impact on his infant son. Any lingering doubt about the necessity of his revenge evaporated completely. Roy photographed everything, copied all digital communications, and left Cindy to suffer through her illness alone. When he returned home, he played the concerned husband perfectly, caring for Mason while Cindy recovered. "I'm so sorry I had to leave," he said, bringing her tea and medicine. "How are you feeling?" "Horrible," Cindy whispered weakly. "It came on so suddenly. Food poisoning can be brutal. Just rest. I've got everything under control." The irony was exquisite. Cindy was accepting comfort from the man she'd tried to destroy, never knowing he'd engineered her suffering as a distraction for gathering evidence that would annihilate her completely. By Christmas Eve, Roy had assembled a comprehensive dossier on both targets. Gabriel was financially ruined, professionally discredited, and psychologically shattered. Cindy was under federal investigation for financial crimes related to her sister's case and facing imminent exposure of her affair and theft. But Roy wasn't finished. The final phase would be the most brutal, leaving both of them alive, but destroyed beyond any hope of recovery. They'd try to take everything from him, including his son's life. Now Roy would show them what a truly ruthless man could accomplish when he had nothing left to lose. Chapter 6: The Trap Springs. New Year's Eve arrived with bitter cold and the promise of reckoning. Roy had spent the holiday week making final preparations for the culmination of his revenge. Every piece was in position, every contingency planned, every weakness mapped and ready for exploitation. The setting for his grand finale was perfect, their annual New Year's Eve party at the Vaughn Mansion. Roy had invited their entire social circle, including business associates, neighbors, and family friends. Gabriel would be there, despite his deteriorating condition, because Roy had specifically insisted his best friend shouldn't miss their traditional celebration. What the guests didn't know was that they were about to witness the complete destruction of two lives. Roy had spent days preparing the house like a theater set. Hidden cameras captured every angle. Recording devices were placed strategically throughout the main rooms, and Aaron Daly's team was positioned as catering staff to ensure security and documentation of the evening's events. The first guests arrived at 7 p.m. Gabriel appeared shortly after, looking gaunt and nervous, his eyes darting constantly, as if expecting attack. The anxiety compound had done its work perfectly. He was a shadow of his former confident self, jumping at sudden sounds and struggling to maintain basic conversations. Cindy played hostess with practiced grace, but Roy noticed the tension in her shoulders, the way her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. She was under enormous stress from her sister's legal troubles and the increasing scrutiny of her own finances. The federal investigation into Jerry's case had expanded to examine family financial connections, putting Cindy's secret accounts at risk of discovery. At 8:30, Roy called for everyone's attention in the main living room. The crowd gathered expectantly, champagne glasses in hand, assuming he was about to make his traditional New Year's toast. Instead, Roy pulled out a tablet and began displaying images on the large wall-mounted screen. "Before we celebrate the new year," Roy said, his voice carrying clearly through the room, "I thought we should reflect on the year behind us. Specifically, some discoveries I've made about trust, loyalty, and family." The first image was a photograph of Gabriel and Cindy in bed together, taken through hidden cameras in Gabriel's apartment. Gasps rippled through the crowd as the implications registered. Cindy went white as paper. "Roy, what are you?" "Please, darling, let me finish." Roy's tone was conversational, almost gentle. "You see, 8 months ago, my wife and my best friend began an affair. Not just a physical relationship, but a conspiracy to destroy my life and steal everything I built." Gabriel tried to move toward the door, but found his path blocked by Aaron Daly, now clearly revealed as security rather than catering staff. The images continued, bank records showing Cindy's theft, text messages discussing Roy's planned commitment to a mental institution, medical reports about the respiratory suppressant found in Mason's system. "They tried to murder my 6-month-old son," Roy continued, his voice never wavering. "The plan was to drive me insane with grief and guilt, have me committed for psychiatric treatment, then take control of my assets and my child." The room was silent, except for someone's sharp intake of breath. Their friends and neighbors stared in shock at the unfolding revelations. "But here's what they didn't know," Roy said, advancing to the next slide. "I've been aware of their conspiracy for weeks, and I've spent that time preparing my response." The screen showed Gabriel's financial ruin, the called gambling debts, the liquidated assets, the transferred business shares. Then Cindy's situation, the frozen bank accounts, the evidence of her theft, the federal warrants that would be served within hours. "Gabriel Bond, you're finished," Roy said matter-of-factly. "Your business partnership is dissolved, your assets are seized for debt payment, and your ex-wife has been provided with evidence of your gambling addiction and conspiracy to commit murder. You'll never see your son again." Gabriel's legs gave out. He collapsed into a chair, the full scope of his destruction finally clear. "Cindy Barrett Vaughn," Roy continued, turning to his wife, "you've been under federal investigation for financial crimes connected to your sister's case. The evidence I've provided to investigators shows systematic theft from our joint accounts and conspiracy to commit fraud. You're facing 15 to 20 years in federal prison." Roy paused, letting the information sink in. But that's not the worst part. He activated a different file, custody documents, already signed by a judge. "I've been granted emergency custody of Mason based on evidence of your attempt to murder him." A family court judge has reviewed recordings of your conversations with Gabriel, including your discussion of how Mason will never remember his father anyway. You've lost your son forever. Cindy screamed, a raw, animalistic sound of complete anguish. She lunged at Roy, but Aaron's team restrained her quickly and professionally. How could you do this to us? Gabriel gasped, his voice broken. We were family. Roy's expression became arctic. You tried to murder my child. You planned to steal my life and destroy my sanity. Did you think there wouldn't be consequences? He gestured to the security team. Remove them. Both of them. As Gabriel and Cindy were escorted from the house, she still screaming threats and curses, he broken and silent. Roy turned back to his stunned guests. I apologize for the unpleasant revelation, he said calmly. But I believe in transparency. Now, shall we toast the new year? The party ended quickly after that, guests making hurried excuses and leaving with shocked expressions. Roy didn't care. He'd achieved his primary objective, the complete and public destruction of his enemies. Later that night, as federal agents arrested Cindy at a motel where she'd fled, and Gabriel was found in his apartment in a catatonic state requiring psychiatric intervention, Roy sat in his study, holding his sleeping son. They'd try to take everything from him. Instead, they'd lost everything themselves. Justice, Roy reflected, could be beautiful when properly executed. Chapter 7. The Reckoning. The new year brought swift and merciless justice as Roy's carefully constructed trap yielded its intended consequences. Within 72 hours of the New Year's Eve revelation, both Cindy and Gabriel were in custody. She facing federal charges he committed for psychiatric evaluation after a complete mental breakdown. The media coverage was extensive and devastating. Highland Park power couple's marriage destroyed by murder plot, read the Dallas Morning News headline. Local television stations ran footage from the party, showing the moment Roy exposed the conspiracy to their social circle. The story had everything: wealth, betrayal, attempted infanticide, and ruthless revenge. Roy emerged from the scandal as a sympathetic figure. Public opinion painted him as a devoted father who'd uncovered his family's plot against his innocent child. His measured response to betrayal was seen as justified, even admirable. Business associates rallied around him, viewing his methodical destruction of the conspirators as evidence of his strength and strategic thinking. Gabriel's breakdown was total and irreversible. The anxiety compound, combined with the psychological trauma of his complete ruin, had triggered a genuine psychiatric collapse. He was found in his apartment 3 days after the party, catatonic and unresponsive, surrounded by evidence of his paranoid delusions scratched into the walls. Dr. Ellen Heath, the pediatrician who'd first identified Mason's poisoning, provided expert testimony about Gabriel's medical knowledge and access to respiratory suppressants. His military medic training made him the only person with both opportunity and expertise to attempt the murder. Mr. Bond would have known exactly how to administer a non-lethal but dangerous dose, Dr. Heath testified during the custody hearing. The precision of the dosage suggests someone with medical training who wanted to create a life-threatening emergency without actually killing the child. Gabriel's ex-wife, Lynn Moore, testified about his gambling addiction and erratic behavior, providing documentation of missed support payments and her fears about his mental instability. With Roy's evidence of the conspiracy, the judge terminated Gabriel's parental rights permanently and issued a restraining order preventing any contact with his son. Confined to a psychiatric facility and facing multiple felony charges, Gabriel's life was effectively over. The facility's psychiatrist reported that he spent most days staring at walls, occasionally mumbling about the man who destroyed everything, but showing no recognition of his own culpability. Cindy's situation was equally dire, but more complex. The federal investigation had expanded beyond her sister's embezzlement to examine the Vaughn family's finances comprehensively. Roy's evidence revealed years of systematic theft from their joint accounts, with Cindy siphoning funds to the Cayman Islands account while planning her escape. The conspiracy charges were devastating. Recorded conversations showed clear intent to commit fraud, murder, and psychological torture. Cindy's dismissive comment about Mason adapting to his father's absence became crucial evidence of her callous disregard for the child's welfare. Her sister Jerry, facing her own federal charges, provided additional testimony in exchange for a reduced sentence. She revealed Cindy's long-standing resentment of Roy's control over their finances and her desire to make him pay for treating her like property. Cindy always said Roy thought he owned her, Jerry testified. She wanted to take everything from him the way she felt he'd taken her freedom. The irony wasn't lost on Roy. Cindy had viewed his financial success and protective instincts as oppression, never recognizing that her privileged lifestyle came at the cost of his hard work and sacrifice. Now she faced decades in federal prison while he retained everything she tried to steal. The custody hearing was a formality. Roy's evidence was overwhelming. Recordings of Cindy discussing Mason's disposal, financial records showing her theft, and medical testimony about the attempted murder. The judge awarded him sole custody with no visitation rights for Cindy. Mrs. Vaughn has demonstrated complete disregard for her child's safety and well-being, the judge stated. Her participation in a conspiracy to murder the child eliminates any possibility of maintaining a parental relationship. Roy's business empire actually strengthened during the scandal. Clients viewed his methodical response to betrayal as evidence of his reliability and strategic thinking. His construction companies won several major contracts from executives who respected his handling of the situation. Roy Vaughn is a man you can trust, commented Dwayne Ryan, CEO of a major development firm. When his own family betrayed him, he didn't break down or lash out emotionally. He gathered evidence, built a case, and executed justice. That's the kind of strategic thinking we want in our business. The pharmaceutical compound Roy had used remained undetectable in Gabriel's system, metabolizing completely within weeks. Brian Williamson had designed it specifically to avoid long-term health consequences while creating temporary psychological vulnerability. Gabriel's breakdown appeared to be purely stress-related, triggered by the exposure of his crimes and the destruction of his life. By March, both conspirators were serving their sentences. Cindy received 18 years in federal prison after pleading guilty to conspiracy, fraud, and attempted murder. Gabriel was sentenced to 15 years, but would serve the time in a psychiatric prison facility due to his mental condition. Roy's victory was complete and permanent. He'd eliminated the threats to his family, retained his wealth and business empire, and gained sole custody of his son. The people who tried to destroy him were now destroyed themselves, facing decades of imprisonment while he moved forward stronger than before. But Roy's revenge hadn't ended with imprisonment. The final phase would ensure that his enemies' suffering continued long after their trials concluded. Chapter 8. The Long Game. Roy's revenge extended far beyond the courtroom victories. While Cindy and Gabriel served their sentences, he continued orchestrating their destruction with methodical precision. They tried to take everything from him. Now he would ensure they never recovered from their fall. The first target was their support systems. Gabriel's remaining family had largely abandoned him after the trial, but his elderly mother Belinda Bond continued visiting the psychiatric facility and maintaining his legal defense fund. Roy systematically destroyed even this final connection. Through Scott Stout's continued surveillance, Roy discovered that Belinda was struggling with medical bills from her own cancer treatment. Her insurance had been denied for an experimental therapy that could extend her life significantly. Roy arranged for the insurance company to receive anonymous tips about Gabriel's conviction and her association with a violent criminal, providing justification for continued coverage denial. When Belinda's condition deteriorated and she could no longer visit Gabriel, his last emotional anchor was severed. The psychiatric facility reported a significant decline in his mental state, with increased catatonic episodes and complete withdrawal from therapy programs. Cindy's situation was more complex, but equally hopeless. Her sister Jerry had been released after serving 2 years, but remained under federal supervision. Roy ensured that Jerry's employment opportunities remained limited through strategic information sharing with potential employers about her criminal conviction and family connections. More cruelly, Roy manipulated Jerry's custody situation with her own children. Through legal channels, he provided evidence to child services suggesting that Jerry's association with Cindy's conspiracy might indicate ongoing child endangerment concerns. While not enough to remove the children, it was sufficient to require intensive supervision and regular evaluations that consumed Jerry's time and limited resources. When Jerry attempted to visit Cindy in federal prison, she found herself under investigation for potential smuggling violations. Accusations that were groundless but required expensive legal defense that she couldn't afford. The message was clear. Any support for Cindy would result in immediate consequences for Jerry's family. Roy's most sophisticated move involved the prisoner's commissary accounts and communication privileges. Through contacts in the federal prison system, including Gerald Daniel, a former client whose construction company had built several federal facilities, Roy ensured that Cindy's incoming funds were frequently lost due to processing errors, and her phone privileges were restricted for minor infractions that mysteriously appeared in her file. It's amazing how often paperwork gets misfiled in the federal system, Gerald mentioned during a business dinner, especially for inmates who don't have anyone advocating for them on the outside. The psychological warfare continued through carefully crafted information campaigns. Roy had Aaron Daly ensure that both Cindy and Gabriel received regular updates about his success and happiness. Newspaper clippings about business victories, photos of Mason's healthy development, reports of Roy's growing social prominence in Dallas society. The most devastating information concerned Mason's thriving development. Roy made sure both prisoners learned that their victim was growing into a happy, intelligent toddler with no memory of their attempted murder. Child development reports were accidentally included in legal correspondence, showing Mason's advanced milestones and secure attachment to his father. Gabriel's response to these updates was complete catatonic withdrawal. His psychiatrist reported that any mention of Roy or Mason triggered severe dissociative episodes, requiring increased medication and isolation protocols. Cindy's reaction was more volatile. She accumulated multiple disciplinary infractions for violent outbursts triggered by news of Roy's continued success. Each infraction extended her sentence and moved her to increasingly restrictive housing conditions. Roy also ensured their crimes continued to haunt them through strategic media management. Whenever either prisoner became eligible for parole consideration or sentence reduction programs, Roy arranged for renewed media coverage of their crimes. The attempted murder of an infant remained emotionally compelling content that guaranteed public outrage and judicial reluctance to reduce sentences. Roy Vaughn builds new life after family betrayal. Read a feature article in Texas Monthly that was delivered to both prisons. The piece detailed Roy's successful single parenting, business expansion, and philanthropic work with child safety organizations, a perfect reminder of everything they'd lost and could never regain. The financial dimension of Roy's revenge was equally thorough. Both prisoners had accumulated significant legal debts that followed them into incarceration. Roy purchased these debts through shell companies, then aggressively pursued collection actions that claimed any assets the prisoners might acquire, including commissary funds, work program earnings, and potential inheritance from deceased relatives. Gabriel's military pension was garnished to pay these debts, leaving him with minimal resources for basic necessities. Cindy's potential earnings from prison work programs were similarly claimed, ensuring she remained in poverty throughout her incarceration. The psychological impact was devastating. Prison counselors reported that both inmates had developed severe depression and anxiety disorders related to their complete social and financial isolation. Neither had any realistic hope of building a life after release. Their crimes were too notorious, their debts too extensive, their support systems too thoroughly destroyed. By Mason's second birthday in October, Roy's revenge had achieved perfect completion. His enemies were not merely imprisoned. They were psychologically, financially, and socially destroyed beyond any possibility of recovery. They would serve their full sentences in increasing isolation and despair, then face homelessness and unemployment upon release. Roy celebrated the milestone quietly, sharing birthday cake with Mason in their beautifully renovated home. The toddler laughed and played, healthy and happy, completely unaware of the conspiracy that had once threatened his life or the methodical revenge that had protected his future. Looking at his son's innocent joy, Roy felt complete satisfaction. Justice had been served with interest. The people who tried to destroy his family had been destroyed themselves, leaving Roy free to build the life they'd attempted to steal. Chapter 9. Perfect Justice. 3 years had passed since the New Year's Eve revelation that destroyed Cindy and Gabriel. Roy Vaughn stood in his study, reading the latest reports from Scott Stout about his former wife and business partner. The updates confirmed what he'd always known would happen: their complete and permanent ruin. Gabriel had been transferred to a maximum security psychiatric facility after attempting suicide twice in federal prison. His mental condition had deteriorated beyond recovery, with doctors reporting severe catatonic episodes and complete dissociation from reality. He spent most days staring at walls, occasionally writing incoherent notes about the destroyer and stolen children. His mother Belinda had died the previous winter, alone and impoverished after her cancer treatment failed. Gabriel never learned of her death. His psychiatric team decided the information would cause further deterioration. He would live out his remaining sentence and any potential future believing he'd been abandoned by everyone who'd ever loved him. Cindy's situation was equally hopeless, but more aware. Federal prison had hardened her, but not in ways that would help her survive post-release. She'd accumulated enough disciplinary infractions to ensure she served her full 18-year sentence without possibility of early release. Her attempts to maintain correspondence with the outside world had been systematically sabotaged, leaving her isolated and bitter. The most crushing blow had come when she learned that Mason, now a happy, articulate 3-year-old, had no memory of her existence. Roy had carefully crafted the child's understanding of his family history, explaining that his mother had been sick and couldn't take care of him. Mason called Roy's new girlfriend Mama and showed no interest in hearing about his biological mother. "Daddy, why don't I have a regular mommy like other kids?" Mason had asked recently. Roy knelt to his son's level, choosing his words carefully. "Some mommies get very sick and can't take care of their babies properly. So Daddy has to protect you and make sure you're safe." "But Mama Jackie takes care of me now," Mason replied, referring to Jackie Bradshaw, the former divorce attorney who'd become Roy's romantic partner and was now an integral part of their family. "That's right, buddy. Mama Jackie loves you very much, and we're going to take care of you forever." The irony of Jackie's involvement wasn't lost on Roy. She'd originally been Cindy's divorce attorney before Roy's evidence revealed the conspiracy. Once she understood the full scope of Cindy and Gabriel's crimes, Jackie had provided crucial assistance in Roy's legal strategy. Their professional relationship had gradually evolved into romance, creating a stable family unit that Cindy could never have provided. Jackie brought her own strength to the relationship. She was intelligent, ambitious, and completely committed to Mason's welfare. Unlike Cindy's calculated performances, Jackie's affection for Roy and his son was genuine and unwavering. Roy's created something beautiful from terrible circumstances, Jackie often told friends. Mason is thriving because his father protected him from people who would have destroyed his life. The business empire had expanded beyond Roy's original ambitions. His handling of the conspiracy had enhanced his reputation for strategic thinking and decisive action. Major corporations sought partnerships with someone who demonstrated such methodical problem-solving under extreme personal stress. Roy now controlled construction projects across 5 states, employed over 200 people, and maintained extensive political and business connections throughout Texas. The wealth and influence that Cindy and Gabriel had tried to steal had multiplied beyond their wildest schemes. The social dimension of his victory was equally complete. Dallas society had embraced Roy's new family while completely ostracizing anyone associated with the conspiracy. Former friends who'd maintained any contact with Cindy or Gabriel found themselves excluded from social events and business opportunities. Even Gabriel's former military colleagues had distanced themselves after learning about the attempted infanticide. The Marine Corps community, which typically supported veterans through difficult times, viewed Gabriel's crimes as unforgivable betrayals of their values. Roy's philanthropic work with child safety organizations had further enhanced his standing in the community. He donated substantial funds to organizations combating child abuse and family violence, using his platform to speak about protecting innocent children from those who would harm them. Roy Vaughn represents the best of fatherhood, commented Dr. Ellen Heath during a child safety symposium. When his own family was threatened, he responded with courage and determination to ensure his son's safety. He's an inspiration to parents everywhere. The final confirmation of Roy's complete victory came through intelligence about his enemy's post-release prospects. Gabriel would never be released. His psychiatric condition had been declared permanent and untreatable. He would spend the rest of his life in institutional care, maintained at taxpayer expense while contributing nothing to society. Cindy faced a different, but equally bleak future. Upon release in 12 years, she would emerge into a world where her crimes were well-documented public record. The internet had preserved every detail of her conspiracy, ensuring that potential employers, landlords, and romantic partners would always know about her attempt to murder an infant. Roy had also ensured that her professional licenses were permanently revoked and her educational credentials flagged in databases used by employers. She would face immediate homelessness, unemployment, and social isolation upon release. Most importantly, she would never regain access to Mason. The custody termination was permanent and irreversible. By the time of her release, Mason would be a teenager with no memory of her and no interest in developing a relationship with the woman who'd tried to kill him as an infant. Standing in his study on a quiet Sunday afternoon, watching Mason play in the backyard with Jackie, Roy reflected on the completeness of his justice. He'd promised to destroy everyone who threatened his family, and he'd kept that promise with surgical precision. The people who tried to take everything from him had lost everything themselves. They faced decades of suffering, isolation, and regret while Roy built the life they'd attempted to steal. Mason was growing up healthy, intelligent, and loved, protected from the evil that had once threatened to destroy him. Roy poured himself a glass of aged whiskey, the same bottle he'd opened the night he'd discovered the conspiracy. It seemed fitting to finish it now, 3 years later, with his victory complete and his enemies permanently defeated. He raised the glass in a private toast to perfect justice. In a world where